Time travelers, come along as we go back to 1863 when Russian actor, director, and producer Konstantin Stanislavski, who developed the highly influential theory of acting called the Stanislavski method, was born. In 1914, following the great success of the Model T, American automobile maker Henry Ford raised his workers' pay from $2.40 to $5 a day and reduced the hours of the workday. 5 years later, in 1919, Anton Drexler founded the German Workers' Party, the forerunner of the Nazi Party, in Munich, Germany. In 1925, Nellie Taylor Ross assumed office in Wyoming, becoming the first female governor of in the United States. 6 years later, in 1931, brought us two events. The first event is American actor Robert Duvall, who is known for his convincing portrayals of a diverse range of characters, was born in San Diego. Also, American dancer and choreographer Alvin Ailey Jr. was born in Rogers, Texas. In San Francisco on this day in 1933, construction began on the Golden Gate Bridge, a suspension bridge that once boasted the longest main span in the world, and that has been celebrated for the manifesto of its setting. Professor Felix Frankfurt of Harvard University was nominated as Justice of the Supreme Court in 1939. 1942 is when big U.S. bombers scored 3 direct hits on Japanese battleships, sank a Japanese destroyer, and damaged other enemy crafts off Davao. The War Department announced Japanese landed forces in Kalu Sigler, Port City, 240 miles north of Singapore. 1946 brought us American actress and director Diane Keaton, who first achieved fame in a quirky comic roles before earning acclaim as a dramatic actress, was born. Waiting for Gadot, a hugely influential and endearing play by Irish writer Samuel Beckett, was staged for the first time in Paris in 1953. 1953 also brought us Burmese government announced that it had given the required year's notice of termination of the Anglo-Burmese Defense Agreement in 1947 and deserved to negotiate a new one. 1956 was when President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his annual State of the Union message to Congress, asked for a strengthening of the U.S. military establishment and the Free Worlds Alliance. 1963 is when the trade agreement was signed by Pakistan and Communist China in Karachi. I'm not entirely sure where that is. I'm not sure if that's in Pakistan or if it's in China. Moving forward in the timeline to 1969, when Henry Cabot Lodge is named by President-elect Richard M. Nixon to replace W. Averell Harriman as the chief U.S. negotiator at the Paris peace talks in Vietnam. I'm not entirely sure if that's right around the time that the war in Vietnam is still going on, or if Vietnam was over by then. Moving on to 1971, when Chile established diplomatic relations with China. And when I say Chile, I don't mean like the chili pepper, I mean the country Chile. American musician Bruce Springsteen released his debut album, Greetings, from Asbury Park, New Jersey in 1973. That year also brought us U.S. President Richard M. Nixon announcing a recognition of the executive branch putting into effect as much of his 1971 plan as is possible without congressional approval. In 1985, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak met with King Hussein in Jordan to discuss problems with the Middle East. They agreed to an international conference attended by U.S. and Soviet representatives as well as by Arabs and Israelis, held the greatest promise for a comprehensive settlement of the area's main problems. Syrian President Hafez al-Assad, however, denounced Hussein as an agent of Zionism because he was dealing with Egypt, which has signed a separate peace treaty with Israel at Camp David, Maryland in 1978. In 1990, Western diplomats reported from Libya that fierce fighting in Nimba County had set thousands of villagers fleeing across the border into County d'Azur. The latest military challenge to General Samuel K. Doe's leadership had been launched in late December by troops of the National Patriotic Front of Libya, commanded by Charles Taylor. In recent years, U.S. support for Doe had significantly weakened, mainly because there was little evidence that observance of human rights by his government had improved or serious effects were being made to eradicate official corruption. Not entirely sure what that means. That was a little bit before my time. A little over a year, like a year and a half before I was even born. 1996, Rene Preval, scheduled to become president of Haiti on February 7th, formally petitioned the United Nations to keep 5,800 man peacekeeping forces in the country for an additional 6 months. The UN mandate was due to expire on February 29th. Two years before the turn of the century, in 1998, Daniel Arap Moi was sworn in as president of Kenya for his 5th consecutive term. Now, I know in the US we have, I want to say, 2 consecutive years or 2 consecutive terms. And I'm not entirely sure how many we can have non-consecutive, but I think you can serve only 2 terms as president. Now, Congress, there's no limit on that, unfortunately. The year after the turn of the century, in 2001, U.S. President Bill Clinton signs an order banning logging and the building of roads in more than 23.5 million hectares, which is just over 58 million acres of national forest lands. So it was pretty much saying that with 58 million acres of national forest nationwide, loggers cannot log any of the trees that are in that area, and whatever roads are there or were there before this ban, no more can be added. Now, with this in mind, people have made like footpaths in national forests, and like the forest rangers, they tend and have like markers and like pathways for people to follow, so that if the need arises and someone goes, oh, hey, I'm going to meet you at this marker in a 2-day time, if they don't show up by, let's say, noon on the second day, they normally would give them a couple hours in case like something would happen. And if they still don't show up, they can go to a forest ranger and be like, hey, this person was supposed to meet me at this marker at this time on this day. It's now X time and they didn't show up. Last I saw, they were at this marker. So between marker A and marker B, they have however far distance as a starting point as to look. That's kind of the whole, what they do with that. Now, in 2003, brought us 2 events. First event was the runoff presidential election in Lithuania. The right-wing candidate Rolandas Pakins unexpectedly defeated incompetent Valdis Atkins, who held the lead in the first round of voting. 2003 also brought us a man steals stealing a small private plane and threatens to crash it into a European Central Bank building in Frankfurt am Main, Germany, which much of downtown is evacuated and the city is paralyzed for several hours until the man is talked down. saying he wished to commemorate the American astronaut Judith Runsnark, who died in the Challenger explosion in 1986. The following year, in 2004, at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Atlanta, Georgia, scientists report that a giant star, which was called, or that a giant star LBV 1806 to 20 on the far side of the Milky Way is by far the biggest star ever seen in the last 100, at least 150 times larger than the sun, and at least 5 million times brighter. That's a big and bright star. I wonder if, since it was that bright, if it was working on like exploding, like at the end of like a star's life, how it like gets brighter and bigger and goes supernova. I wonder if that's what it was doing. We move on to 2005, when the dwarf planet Eris was discovered, and images taken 2 years earlier at Palomar Observatory in California. In 2006, Iran unexpectedly canceled a meeting with the International Atomic Energy Agency about its plans to restart the nuclear program. That seems a little sus to me. 2013 brought us continued search for a private plane that disappeared after takeoff from a resort in Venezuela the previous day. The plane carried 4 passengers, including Ferto Missoni, head of the Italy's Missoni fashion house, and 2 crew members. Eusebio, perhaps the greatest Portuguese football or U.S. soccer player of all time, passed away in Liddensburg in 2014. And with this, we return to 2024 and our current history. Until next time.